Hello, I am Kenya Adams, Program Manager in the Office of Third Goal and Return Volunteer Services. On behalf of Peace Corps, I would like to welcome you all and thank you for joining us for today's session, Preparing for the Fair Career Coaching. Please note that today's webinar will be recorded. During the webinar, please drop any questions that you have into our Q&A box and look in the chat for relevant links and additional information. We have received your questions and submitted during registration and will be addressing them throughout. Now I would like to introduce our question moderator, Heather Thompson, and presenter today, Return Peace Corps volunteer from Sri Lanka and certified career transition coach, Kimberly Murphy.
Well, thank you, Kenya, for the very warm welcome. It is a real pleasure for me to be here with you today. And it's my goal that by the end of this presentation, you are better prepared for the fair and to have an increased confidence and agility in navigating future career transitions as well. As a career transition coach, I'm going to take a slightly different approach to preparation than you might be used to. I will spend a fair amount of time on the importance of self reflection as the critical first step in your preparation. You will have greater success in your career transition if you're able to identify and communicate your purpose throughout all aspects of your job search. I'm just going to take a minute here and pull up my slides to share with you. So, as Kenya mentioned, my name is Kimberly Murphy. I go by Kim. Uh, and I would like to begin by telling you a little bit about myself and actually check my clock real quick to make sure I keep on time. So, most relevant to this presentation is that I'm a professional certified coach specializing in career transition. Since 2015, I have coached literally hundreds of federal employees and civil service employees, or federal, meaning civil service and foreign service employees through career transition. I am also a returned Peace Corps volunteer. I served in Sri Lanka from 1990 to 1992. I recently retired from the Foreign Service after 33 years of combined federal service, which also included being a civil servant at USDA. I started my love for teaching when I was a Close Up Foundation teacher back even before I did Peace Corps. But there is relevance here. I am from Minneapolis, Minnesota originally, and I do call it home, even though I probably will never live there again. I graduated from St. Olaf College and George Washington University, and currently I am a member of the Rotary Club, as well as a member of Women of Peace Corps Legacy. Now, you might be thinking, wow, that's a lot of hodgepodge different things spanning decades. Why is she telling us that? And I have shared these details with you because, in addition to being something about my background, they also represent communities that are important to me. And as you will see later in the presentation, communities are a critical, really a vital part of the job search process, in particular when it comes to networking. So that is Kim Murphy in a nutshell. I'll take a minute to quickly review the topics for you. Today, I am touching on topics that I normally cover in about 30 hours of workshops and presentations. So 1 hour and 15 minutes does not allow us to dive deeply into any of these topics, but we will take a broad look to help you prepare for the fair. Because of the limited time and because I'm a career coach with that focus, we will not go into the technical aspects of a lot of these topics, but rather more conceptual. I understand you have access to many other presentations that are more technical in nature, such as federal resume writing, navigating USA jobs, LinkedIn, and a variety of panel discussions on how to apply to State Department or USAID, for instance. Much of what I am going to say applies to federal or private sector, and really any kind of a job search, as you'll see. And I do hope you'll ask questions for clarity throughout along the way. So the topics I'm going to cover today, um, we'll start with a job search portfolio. And this is a holistic, progressive approach to the job search process. It's based on a portfolio of strategies and tools that will empower you to bring your full self to the job search process while being nimble, flexible, and agile in applying to different positions in different companies, maybe even in different industries or sectors. So it's based on this full portfolio of interconnected tools, ranging from elevator pitches all the way to professional media presence, such as LinkedIn. And it all starts with purpose driven communication as the framework for everything you do in your job search, from writing a resume to preparing for an interview or to networking. While you may prefer to jump immediately to writing that resume, or you may in fact already have one, I guarantee you, if you take your time to go through these steps purposefully, you will present yourself more authentically. So, after exploring purpose driven communication, we'll have a framework for our job search tools. We then need to build the foundation, and we'll do that through putting together an accomplishments bank, which is a repository of all the good things we've done in our career. And we will then apply these tools, the framework and the foundation, to writing a resume. As an example, you also might choose to write a bio or a CV, but for the purposes of this presentation, we'll be talking about resumes and cover letters. And finally, oh, and we will then also apply it to interviewing, these same strategies. And then we will touch on networking and online job search tools at the end. Throughout this presentation, I do apologize. I will be referring to my notes so that I stay on task. There's so much I want to talk about. Like I said, usually about 30 hours, and I'm really trying hard to stay on task. Um, we, at the end of each topic, we will pause for questions, and I will have some homework for you to do. It's optional. You can decide if you want to do it or not, but okay. I would like to start with any burning questions. Heather, is there anything out there?
Yeah, Kim, before the webinar, we did get a number of questions around the topic of how do you pivot into a new field? How do you pivot from where you are now into something new?
That is a really good question. And to be honest, something that I focused on for 5 years because I was helping people transition, and mainly foreign service, transition out of the foreign service into something usually entirely different. And it can be kind of daunting. I would suggest many things that we will cover in this presentation, but just generally speaking, if you want to pivot into another industry, I would first suggest utilizing information interviews. Start learning more about that industry, start networking in that industry, start meeting people. And also, while you're doing this, spend some time on exploring your purpose to find out where there is alignment between you and that industry. as you're um, going along, as you're getting started. And I guess I'd also suggest that you look at vacancy announcements, actual job descriptions, so that you can see what are the skills that this industry is looking for, this sector. Compare that with your own skills and see if you can do some training, perhaps anything, just to make sure to start working on anything that you might be lacking that is desirable in that industry. I'd also take a look at when you're putting together your resume for a career switch, make sure when you're writing your accomplishments that you focus on transferable skills, skills that you used in this previous life, this previous career that are also applicable to this new career. So um, let's revisit that. And if you still have any questions or maybe even more specific questions at the end of the presentation, that's a good one
Thank
and
you,
quite
Kim.
common.
Yeah. And for everyone watching, we encourage you to put your questions into the Q&A box, and Kim will continue to answer them as we go.
Thank you, Heather. And yes, like I said, I'll take a quick break at the end of each section, and you're welcome to put your questions in throughout, and this will allow me to also grab a quick sip of water. As I mentioned, I recommend a portfolio approach to the job search. It's progressive and it's comprehensive. A portfolio is a robust set of content that emphasizes your message in a medium that fits your audience. So you're looking at content, message, medium, three very important things. In this regard, one size does not fit all. A portfolio is a multi-pronged strategy which starts by creating your personal branding statement, which will work into a tagline and an elevator pitch. It also consists of this accomplishments bank I talked about earlier. And really, when you think about it, and well, to reiterate what I said earlier, the branding statement, the tagline, the elevator pitch, that is the framework of your resume. The accomplishments bank is the foundation of that resume. So, really investing time in these things before you get to drafting can prove to be very valuable. Like I said, so by investing time in those steps, you can then be more flexible to create and tailor your resumes or CV, biography, um, your cover letters. Also, you may choose to include in your portfolio videos, a LinkedIn profile, maybe even a website. Some industries do accept or even encourage resumes by video. It's quite an interesting concept. And finally, you may consider business cards as part of your portfolio. They are a bit dated in our technology, where we are today with our technology. However, they can still serve a purpose. If, you're at a meeting and you didn't get time to really share contacts with somebody, you can slip them your card and then they can have it for later. Also, there are tech savvy versions of business cards, QR code type business cards. So you can get savvy with them. A quick note about your digital presence, your online presence as part of your job search portfolio. Even if you do not cultivate that, like have an active LinkedIn, you want to be cautious about what might be out there on social media about you. You want to make sure that everything that an employer might find about you aligns with the brand that you are building. So even if you don't cultivate your social media presence or professional media presence, clean it up. So as I mentioned, A very important part, the first part of developing your job search portfolio is purpose-driven communication. And I recommend that you take some time to understand your motivation so that your communication is purpose-driven. One approach to this is it really resonates with me is Simon Sinek's Start with Why. He wrote a book about this. He has TED Talks about this. But his Start with Why approach maintains that the most successful and inspiring people communicate from the inside out. This means they emphasize the why when looking at this golden circle of communication on the slide. They emphasize the why behind what they do or why they exist before what they do or how they do it. And this type of inside out communication is purpose driven. It's connected to your values. And if you use it in preparing your job search portfolio, you are bound to make a stronger, more lasting impression on potential employers. For instance, by starting your resume with a summary section, an executive summary that communicates your overarching purpose or your why, you will set a tone for the rest of the document that gives a potential employer insight into your motivations. Or let's say when detailing your work experience and accomplishments in an interview, connect your accomplishments with your relevant values to demonstrate your passion and your commitment to potential employers, not just how you did something or what you did. This can also give the potential employer an idea of how your contributions align with their mission and goals. This could very well set you apart. Now, excuse me, went backwards. Now, if this does not resonate with you particularly, you can think about articulating your purpose in a different way. And that is, for instance, with Ikigai. Ikigai is a Japanese concept which loosely translates into reason for being or sense of purpose. And it is comprised of four different spheres, four different elements: what you are good at, what you love, what the world needs, and what you can be paid for. And in preparing for your job search, you can explore these areas, learn more about yourself, and then when you're searching for that job, try to find those positions that create an intersection. For instance, there are four sub intersections and one main intersection. What you are good at and what you love intersect at passion. What you love and what the world needs intersects at mission. What the world needs and what you can be paid for intersects at vocation. What you can be paid for and what you're good at intersects at profession. And ideally, you can find a little bit of everything in your job search to get to the center um, and achieve ikigai or your reason for being. And in the job search process, you want to focus on the roles and the opportunities that resonate with your ikigai to enhance your job satisfaction and career fulfillment, as well as strengthening, and it would also strengthen the connection that you have with this potential employer. Also, another way to bring your authentic self to the job search and stand apart in the process. So, after you've spent some time exploring your purpose, you can develop a brand. I highly recommend that you develop a brand for your job search, particularly if you are looking at a lot of different types of jobs. You will have a different brand for each of those jobs. Now, when developing your brand, you want to keep in mind the 5 C's: clarity, consistency, content, connection, and confidence. They're all equally important in building a successful brand that will help you attain your goals. Now, what might you use your brand for? Well, you want to articulate your purpose to a potential employer, showcase your expertise, and you also want to build your network throughout your job search. The key elements that you would use to convey your brand are your elevator pitch, the resume and cover letter combination, and your social media presence if you decide to go that far. Now, in thinking of developing your brand, when developing it, ask yourself 2 questions. What am I interested in? And what is important to me? These are the 2 overarching questions. So, a couple examples of this could be cross-cultural coach for expatriates, improving food distribution to address hunger. You can start it, with that participial phrase or with an adjective or a noun. It's very open, and there are a lot of different resources on how to um, develop your brand online, and I believe my colleagues are dropping in links, relevant links as we go along that can supplement what I am presenting. So I think we've all heard about the elevator pitch, and it is real and it is effective. And so after you've developed your brand, you're ready to expound on this in an elevator pitch, otherwise known as a 30-second summary, which is a short summary about you. It's limited to the length of an elevator ride, typically 30 to 45 seconds. It's a concise statement that grabs attention and communicates value, ideally leading to a next step. And it compels your audience to want to continue that conversation with you. So, in an elevator pitch, you want to be sure to do the following things: introduce yourself, explain what you do, identify who you serve, state what makes you different, include an exciting hook, that thing that's going to compel them to continue the conversation. And you're going to want to keep in mind to tailor it to different audiences. The same elevator pitch, much like the same brand, is not going to fit for everybody. And just before coming online, I jotted one down. I'll read it out since I haven't practiced it, so I can't totally pitch it. But this is kind of an example. Hi, my name's Kim. I'm a career transition coach and retired Foreign Service officer. My background has provided me an interesting mix of understanding different cultures and knowing how to coach people to their best selves. I'm dedicated to helping professionals find their dream career paths in international organizations. I understand you're looking for in-house coaches. I'd love to show you what I can do with a free coaching demo. Could we set up a time for this? So that's a pretty targeted pitch. So if you look through those 5 criteria, you can see that I introduced myself, explained what I did, identified my clientele, who I serve, what makes me different, and that hook was offering a service. The thing is that you really want to compel them in your way to continue that conversation. So all of this then can be synthesized into a tagline, also known as your personal slogan, not entirely not all that unlike your brand, but more targeted even than that. It should be short, concise, and to the point. You should be able to tell the world in exactly 6 words or less who you are. Some examples: global career transition coach, building bridges across borders. You can be creative or direct. The first one was pretty direct, the second one was more creative. So Taglines provide many benefits. They establish clear communication from the very beginning. And this clear communication not only serves the potential employer, but also you as you are writing your resume. It's that framework, and it can keep you focused as you're putting together that resume. A tagline creates an immediate impression, something that's very important to do in a competitive job market. It conveys brand identity, highlights your key strengths and values right there in just 6 words or so. It highlights what you are offering, what you bring to the table. And a tagline can differentiate and distinguish you from the rest of the applicant pool. For instance, maybe there are so many applicants, your name doesn't pop into one of the hiring officials' minds, but your tagline might if you have a catchy and appropriate tagline. And taglines also give you just another opportunity to align yourself with the job requirements and more specifically demonstrate to the employer how you align with their mission and their goals. Again, this is not something that everybody does, entirely optional, but suggestions for you to bring your full authentic self to the job search process. So at this time, we are at the end of purpose-driven communication, and I see I need to speed things up a little bit, so I will do that. And I offer this homework suggestion to you. 4 things: explore and define your purpose, develop your brand, draft an elevator pitch, and create a tagline. And at that time, I'd like to ask Heather if there are any specific questions on this section.
Yeah, Kim, we do have one question. One of the participants was wondering, what are some strategies that you might use when you're looking to schedule informational interviews with companies or people that you don't have a previous connection with?
I love that question. And we are going to cover that specifically in about 20 slides.
Excellent.
So I appreciate that question.
Yeah.
Very important. Your thinking.
I think that's all we have for now.
Okay, this will help us get back on task. Okay, so I mentioned that our second topic is the accomplishments bank, or third topic, second big part of the job search portfolio. So once you're more aligned with your purpose and you have articulated it in a brand, elevator pitch, and a tagline, you have created the framework for your resume. This framework, as I said, will not only help you stay focused in drafting it, but it'll also present you as a more focused applicant to the potential employer. So now you have to really create that substance for the resume. Before drafting a resume for any purpose, I suggest you take time to first focus on compiling all of your accomplishments into this bank. And this will serve as a repository of your skills and results. It will be a comprehensive and exhaustive list covering your career. Go through any document related to your previous work that has your job responsibilities or your accomplishments, whether that is an annual evaluation, an award nomination, a description of service, a job description. Take out all of those documents and just start brainstorming your accomplishments within each of those jobs. An accomplishment, this bank should demonstrate your skills, achievements, and results. We cannot forget the results. They are critical. And we'll talk more about that in a little bit. accomplishments will highlight what is unique about you. And with this audience right here in particular, what is unique about you are cross-cultural competencies, amongst so much other stuff. But we'll talk a little bit about cross-cultural competencies in just a second. And keep in mind that this bank will be well worth the effort because it's going to take time. It will. Because this will be readily available to you for tailored resumes. And tailored resumes will stand out, whether you are applying in the federal sector or the private sector. So it's worth the time. And as you are starting to put together this list, if you are at a loss for deciding which skills to focus on, because many accomplishments can use multiple skills. But if you're having a hard time deciding which skills to focus on, there are many resources out there, such as this LinkedIn list of the most in-demand skills of 2024, with the top skill of the moment being adaptability, which we will conveniently and coincidentally find in our list of cross-cultural competencies. There are so many more than I'm just highlighting 10 here, and I'm not going to read them all. I'll pull them up onto the screen. You will have access to these slides. You can read them more on your own time. But I've mentioned the cross-cultural competencies on the last slide, and I just wanted to take a few minutes to impress upon you the uniqueness you bring to the job market based upon the type of work you have been doing, whether as Peace Corps staff or as a Peace Corps volunteer or both. Your work has put you in unique circumstances that require different skills. Or you can even think of it as using common skills in a different way. And you can capitalize on this when writing your accomplishments. So here's a list I put together. Cultural sensitivity, and I'll leave the reading to you on your own time. Communication skills, adaptability, empathy, resilience, patience, curiosity, self-awareness, conflict resolution, and cultural integration. So in short, these competencies exhibit an ability to build strong relationships, collaborate effectively, and achieve sustainable goals in diverse communities in challenging, unpredictable circumstances. And you don't have to be overseas in another country for this to be the case. So don't sell yourself short. Don't think that everybody has all these skills because they don't. So capitalize on those cross-cultural competencies. And in a few minutes, we'll take a look at how we can incorporate these into our accomplishments, into writing our accomplishments. So when writing our accomplishments, the key is really about communicating results. So if the result is tangible, this is quite easy. Productivity increased by 25%. People served increased from 5 to 3,000. If the result is not tangible, it requires more thought. We can measure impact. For instance, enhanced image of the United States, improved relations with the host nation. Regardless whether we are quantifying a tangible result or describing impact, we want to be sure to be specific and highlight the skills and the knowledge used in attaining that result. So there are many different techniques out there for drafting accomplishments. I like the STARS method. You may also have seen it as the STAR method. I like to keep that second S at the end, so I don't forget about the skills that are involved in the accomplishment. So STARS is a structured approach to writing accomplishments for a resume or even for preparing for an interview. And we'll go through the acronym situation. This is where you describe the context or the background of the accomplishment. Task. This is where you outline the specific task or objective that you needed to accomplish. Sorry. Actions. This is where you detail what actions you had to take to address that situation or task. Results. What was your impact? What was the outcome of your actions? And finally, skills. What skills did you use in accomplishing this? And this could be relevant technical skills, interpersonal skills, or, as we just discussed, cross-cultural competencies. Now, here's just a real quick example. Responsible for grant writing and preparing external proposals. This is a fine bullet point for a resume. Nothing wrong with it, but it is a bit lackluster. So if we take into consideration the STARS method, we could come up with something like this, assuming it's all true. Managed the grant process and wrote 6 successful grant proposals for $400,000, enabling the organization to serve an additional 12 communities across the state. That has a lot of substance in it, a lot of great detail, and you can see almost every one of the stars within that. By way of example, we're going to go through this step by step, taking a responsibility to a results-based accomplishment. For instance, let's say we have the responsibility, developed English language curriculum. We can turn this into an accomplishment by adding a result and a timeline. Developed English language curriculum that was implemented in 20 schools over 8 months. Now that's going to start getting attention. And then, however, we can make it even more impressive by measuring the result and putting it at the beginning. Improved language proficiency scores 10% by developing, and then it goes on. That is really going to catch some attention. And then finally, we can look at including a cross-cultural competency. Collaborated with local counterparts to improve language proficiency 10% by developing English language curriculum that was implemented in 20 schools over 8 months. And you may say to yourself, well, I see nothing on there that was on that list of cross-cultural competencies she shared. It's implied. Collaborated with local counterparts, to me, right off the bat, implies cultural sensitivity, communication skills, cultural integration, possibly even a bit of conflict resolution. And so you may also infer these competencies. So a few more examples just to really drill it down and to also acknowledge that you're not going to get every single stars every time. Resultant skills are key, however. So harness local practices and traditional knowledge to introduce a new maize farming technique, which reduced pesticide use by 10% and increased production by 20% in 2 years. That is pretty impressive. And so you see it continue, and you will have access to this. Earlier, I mentioned you don't have to be in an overseas environment to exhibit a cross-cultural competency. For instance, this third one, collaborated with stakeholders to design and deliver a webinar targeted at underserved college campuses, which directly resulted in 200 diverse students joining the Peace Corps. So lots of different ways that you can exhibit or utilize the STARS method along with a cross-cultural competency. So at this time, we have come to the end of the Accomplishments Bank section, and I'd like to suggest to you as homework that you compile documents from your previous work. Remember when I said it's exhaustive and comprehensive? It's going to take time. Also, start building that accomplishments bank. Utilize the STARS method. Consider your cross-cultural competencies. If you don't particularly like the STARS method, think of another one of your own, or do some looking around on the internet and you'll find some other great suggestions. And I'd like to just pause for a minute to see if there are any questions.
Yeah, Kim, you've mentioned two really good tips for giving sort of an overall snapshot of who you are and your experience, such as the tagline and then the accomplishments bank. Are those two things something you'd recommend putting maybe at the beginning of your resume?
Yes. And we have it. Wow, you guys are listening very well and thinking ahead. I do suggest that in our next session with the tagline. Now, to put it on the resume. With the Accomplishments Bank, that is a repository for you to compile all of the great things that you have done throughout your career. And then, as you are in career transition or searching for a job, applying to different things, you can pull from that Accomplishments Bank to tailor specific resumes to specific purposes. Um, as I will say shortly, to get noticed, you want to tailor your resume.
That makes sense. Thank you. And one other question, what if you aren't able to quantify or you don't really know the impact of a project that you've done? What if you don't have the numbers or the data? What can you do to make that experience more impactful?
That is a great question. Well, first I would consider if it's worth putting on the resume. If you decide yes, because I don't want to say it wasn't a worthwhile accomplishment, but if you cannot point to accomplishing something in either a tangible result or an impact, or a final result, maybe that's where I'm going with this. What is the final result? Did your efforts lead to a report being done or a greater understanding? It might not be something so tangible, but was there an end product at least? I hope that kind of differentiates a little bit between uh, the possibility of putting an end product down there rather than a result. If you don't know that result yet, maybe it's in progress. But also question if it's going to make an impact on your resume by having it on there at all.
Thank you very much. That's all for that section.
Okay, thank you, Heather. Appreciate that. So now we're going into the resume. And as I mentioned earlier, this will be more conceptual in nature rather than technical. And we will look at more the development of this purpose-driven resume. And so we have the framework for our resume, the purpose, the brand, the tagline, even the elevator pitch to support it, and the foundation, which are the accomplishments. So now we can start building our purpose-driven resume, and you'll want to choose the best type and format to fit your needs. Just a quick note, probably the most common question about resumes is what is the appropriate length? And very, very generally speaking, 2 pages or less is the best for the private sector, and for the public sector, such as federal jobs, more is better, so you can feel free to go beyond 2 pages. This is particularly important when you know that your resume will be going through a computer scan as part of the screening process, because you want to make sure that you have all of those key words that will get caught by that computer scanner and increase your chances for moving ahead in the selection process. And I understand, as Kenya, I believe, mentioned, there will be a presentation on this federal resumes. So there are basically 2 different types of resumes: career summary and job search. I am talking in general terms here. So you would use a career summary resume if you only want to outline your work history to somebody, the jobs, the organizations, the dates, the positions. You do not focus on your accomplishments in this type of resume. It is merely to relay what you have done in the past. You might include a sentence on a major responsibility under each job. This is great to use as part of introducing yourself. For instance, as an informational interview, if you're requesting an informational interview, introduce yourself, and attached, here's more about me. You can also use it as a general marketing tool for yourself, kind of like a bio, but in the resume format. The other general type of resumes is job search resume. This obviously is to use when you are searching for a job. And in this type of resume, you are highlighting your accomplishments within your work experience. So it's a combination of your experience and your results driven accomplishments. You can choose to write a generic or a specific job search resume. And I think I stated quite clearly my recommendation that you should tailor your resume to each specific purpose to increase your chances of being noticed. So there are generally 3 different types of resume formats. We have the chronological, the functional, and the hybrid. The chronological is a format, is a summary of your experience in which you, or of your work history, in which you list your accomplishments within that work experience. It's usually from the present, going back later, or more in history. There's also the functional resume, which is a skill summary where you list your accomplishments, highlight your key skills, and present your accomplishments underneath those skills. Then there's the hybrid, which is usually begins with the functional style. You have key skills listed, your accomplishments there, and then a chronological listing of your work experience to follow that, almost like the career summary resume type. So it's really up to you what you think would fit your needs and your preferences better. There are basically 5 different sections to a resume. We have the header. This is where your name, your contact information go, and this is the perfect place for that tagline. I highly recommend that you put your tagline on the resume for all of those reasons that we talked about earlier, to gain instant recognition, to highlight from the get-go who you are and what you offer, and to perhaps increase your chances of being remembered. We don't really put addresses, street addresses anymore in the header. Usually city, state are fine, not even entirely necessary, but critical is your email, cell phone number, and LinkedIn too, and any other social or professional media that you might have. The executive summary is the next section, and it is an optional section. I highly recommend it as an additional way to highlight your key experience and your objective. This is really where you can have your purpose-driven communication on a resume, and to supplement that message that you started with your tagline in the header. Then, of course, professional experience is the bulk of the resume. This is where your accomplishments are, and you can choose to do this in the functional or the chronological style, or even a hybrid of that. Education comes next, formal degrees and training. I might even, I will add the caveat of relevant training. That training that's relevant to that job. And then there's the other category, which can include publications, awards, honors, volunteer activities, languages, and hobbies. And you might have kind of raised your eyebrows at hobbies. And yes, hobbies can augment your resume appropriately if you include them with caution. Make sure it's relevant to the job, and also make sure it augments or enhances what your brand is, that brand that you've been building throughout. So to summarize, top 10 tips for resume writing, in particular, writing a purpose-driven resume. Communicate a consistent message throughout, from the top to the bottom. Lead with a powerful executive summary. Take this opportunity to let them know more about you. Highlight only the relevant accomplishments. Quantify results when possible. Include keywords from the vacancy announcement, particularly in cases where it will be scanned electronically as the first stage. Use transferable skills, not responsibilities. Utilize your unique Peace Corps experience and cross-cultural skills. Be succinct. Your bullets, no bullet should really be more than 3 lines, maybe 4. So you really have to use words sparingly. Write in the past tense. This may seem like a no-brainer. However, when we are transposing information from, let's say, an award or an annual evaluation, sometimes we forget to change the tenses. Sometimes it's a compound sentence, and there are 3 verb clauses. We change the first verb, but not the second or the third along the string. So really make sure everything except that current job is in the past tense. And your executive summary, of course, that would be present. And in that vein, proofread. You must read it over and over again. Have friends, family, many people proofread it, and also give you feedback, not just for errors, typos, but also for content feedback. So very closely linked to a resume is a cover letter. Many people believe cover letters are obsolete. I do not believe that. I maintain that they are a very, very important part of your job search portfolio, and they are a perfect opportunity for you to augment what is in your resume. Caveat with this, if you are applying through USA Jobs, no need for a cover letter. They don't want it. It could just it could complicate your application, and no need to do it. So, few words on cover letters, not obsolete. They are a motivational letter, a chance to share your motivation. they supplement, not reiterate, what is in your resume. And a few statistics in support of cover letters from Forbes magazine. 83% of HR professionals believe cover letters are essential when making hiring decisions. And this one is interesting. More than 7 in 10 recruiters expect to receive a cover letter, even if they mark them as optional in the job advertisement. So take that for what it's worth to you, but I highly recommend spending that additional time on a cover letter. So, what would go in a cover letter? I recommend a very basic 4-paragraph letter or email. Paragraph 1, why the letter? 2, why them? Paragraph 3, why you? And paragraph 4, what next? This is your call to action. Request a follow up, a short meeting, etc. Reiterate your interest. So, with that, we have come to the end of the resume and cover letter section. And I would like to offer you this homework. Choose your resume type and format, develop your resume, and draft a cover letter template. And if you are not actively applying for a specific job right now, I would suggest to you that you go um, find a job that interests you in the general field that you are looking at and use that vacancy announcement as your practice, as your template. So, with that, I would like to ask Heather if we have any questions on this section.
Yeah, I've got a tough one for you.
Oh, uh-oh.
So we know that it's important to put dates, and how long you've worked in each position. How imperative is it to also include the year? Because I know there are some job seekers that are concerned about issues of ageism, and that if they include the year that they graduated from college, for example, that it might give away information that could be used against them.
Yeah. Well, it's illegal to use that information against them, number one. However, this is tricky. And like I mentioned earlier, I spent 5 years specifically helping um, federal, foreign service and civil service officers retire from the foreign service or from the State Department and go into something else. This was a key topic. How do I hide my age? You can't. Yeah, you can't. And let me just say a couple of things. And this is really a coach type conversation that begins with, what are you looking for? Because if you have 40 years of experience, you're probably looking for something that it requires more experience. You've done certain things in your life. You're not looking for an entry level position, more than likely. I'm talking in generalities here. But let me just say, it's very difficult to hide your age if you're putting together a resume that has your experience, whether you have dates or no dates on it.
Mhm.
There's going to be a lot of work, different experience with over the 40 years. Um, Experience is an asset, and you are more experienced with more years of work. And, it's kind of a catch-22. I recommend, and, I mentioned I'm going through my own career transition here too. I recommend putting the dates out there. I'm not going to hide,
Mhm.
be able to hide. I'd love to hide. I'm not going to be able to hide my age. However, what I will suggest to you is that you make sure that when you're applying, if you're worried that you might be considered older or outdated for a certain position, make sure that your skills are current and relevant. Research that job carefully. And um, in your resume or in an interview, make sure to highlight that, just because you're whatever age doesn't mean you aren't aware of the modern technologies. And, along with that, right off the bat, don't use your Hotmail or your AOL for your job search. I still use my Hotmail for personal, but for professional things, I use Gmail. It's a simple thing. It shows, that and there are even better ones than Gmail now. It just shows that you're staying current with technology. As I understand it, with the work I did with retirees, is that the number one fear with older applicants is that they're not current on technology.
Mhm. That makes sense. Thank you.
Hard
That's
question. You are
advice.
right,
It
Heather.
is a hard question.
Yeah.
I have one more that's maybe a little simpler. When you're tailoring your resume for a specific job, is it appropriate to leave off some experiences that just aren't relevant to that position?
Absolutely. However, be careful that it does not create gaps that you might have to explain. So that's my first comment. The second would be before determining completely that that job is not relevant, um, think about your skills in a transferable way. The jobs, your old job, the job you're looking at, they might be in two totally different industries, doing two totally different things, but kind of think about, what did I do here that is relevant to that? And maybe you can talk about that particular job uh, in a transferable and a relevant way. I really like what you're thinking about, though, and that is to tailor a resume and to only include relevant um, things. But don't create gaps that you might have to explain either.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. So it might be better to highlight within that job certain elements that could be applicable to this current position you're applying for, rather than leave gaps in your resume.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Nicely said. Okay, shall we move on? Now we're going to take a look at how to develop this or incorporate this purpose-driven approach into interviews. And interviews can happen in many, many different venues these days, especially with our increased agility in digital conferencing. So just quick note to get you thinking about this, because you're going to want to prepare for all of these different types. You might have an interview by phone. It might be virtual, Zoom, Teams, etc. It could be in person. It could be with a panel. It could be a structured format, and it could be a behavioral format. So these are things that you're going to want to start thinking about in your job search, and prepare yourself for the different possibilities. So I'll just take a couple minutes here to talk about structured interviews versus behavioral interviews, because they are quite different and require to some extent different preparation. So structured interviews are often the first type of interview in a screening process. This is, well, they can feel scripted because they are, and they are based on getting information about your skills and experience in relation to a certain set of criteria, usually that which is spelled out in the vacancy, but getting your skills and experience in relation to that vacancy announcement and comparing you to the other applicants. So the interviewer is going to ask every candidate the same questions. and the questions will be based on the job analysis and skills. The interviewer will very likely take a lot of notes because they're going to have to compare. They will rate you on a scale and then compare you to the other candidates. This type of interview can often feel a bit disconnected, like you're not really connecting with that interviewer. Some tips: be ready to explain everything on and not on your resume. Prepare examples for everything on the job announcement. And if necessary, ask to restate. You want to make sure you're answering the right question. You don't want to do this every time, listen carefully, but if you're unsure, ask to restate. And above all else, answer the question first. Oftentimes, we're thinking so much about our answer that we neglect to clearly answer the question first. This is a bottom line up front. Use the bluff technique. Now, behavioral interviews, on the other hand, are harder to prepare for, but it is even more important to prepare for these. They are very much situational type interviews, and they will have you thinking on your feet. So you want to prepare as much as you can in advance so that in those think on your feet moments, you have something to pull out quickly. Um, Characteristics, situational scenarios. What would you do if, when you had a tight deadline, what did you do? Tell me about a time you used persuasion to convince someone. Tell me about a time um, you set and reached an impossible goal. These are the types of questions an interviewer would ask you. And tips with this are very similar to the other ones. However, the examples you prepare in advance are going to be more narrative in nature. You will be telling little stories about these situations. And this is where the STARS method can be very helpful to you. And also, this when you're preparing your examples, think of, with that one example, or each example, how you could use that narrative to answer a question about team building, or perhaps a question about conflict resolution, or a question about prioritizing deadlines. So we very rarely use our skills in isolation. So as you're preparing your narrative, look at how you can use it to answer multiple questions that might come up. In the interview, give yourself time to think. Uh, we often get out of nervousness and jump right in and start answering the questions, but thoughtful reflection is a very positive behavior. It lets the interviewer know you're listening, processing your answer. And I'm talking seconds, not minutes, but just a few seconds to get your thoughts together before you jump into your narrative. And in behavioral interviews, you have to be even more conscious about answering the question first, because you're in a way telling, like I said, little stories, little narratives, and you want to make it clear that you are addressing that question from the beginning and then go into your story. So, two basic kinds of interviews, they're general kinds of interviews. And I will give you, in summary, 8 tips here. And my biggest overarching tip really is go through the vacancy announcement, highlight skills, prepare examples of relevant skills, and also prepare narrative examples of how you used those skills. Another tip, it just popped in by majority of interviews will start with 2 questions of this, some variation of these 2 questions. Tell us about yourself. What interests you in this job? Make sure to practice those. Literally write down what you would say to those things and practice it. Not so that you memorize it, but so that it's natural to you. And more than anything, so that you don't ramble in the interview, so that you stay focused. Some other tips: research the company, understand the role, the job, review relevant skills that you have that are in the job, gather necessary documents, practice common questions. There are a lot of lists out there. I'll share with you in a minute one. Prepare questions to ask them at the end of the interview. Every interview will end with, "Do you have any questions for us?" They want it. It leaves a very stronger impression if you have questions for them, although I don't encourage you to ask about salary from the very first interview. Rehearse your interview etiquette so that you're more practiced and that you're more composed when you're in the actual interview itself, and perhaps maybe a little nervous. Um, a note on interviewing across cultures: in this, you will want to pay particular attention to that tip if you are interviewing across cultures. Make sure that you're aware of any cultural nuances or norms that you should be aware of so that you don't unintentionally offend in the interview. Test your IT connections and your apps in advance. I cannot stress this enough. Of course, if it's a virtual interview. For instance, I would prefer not to be wearing a headset today, but I tested my IT. I actually recorded an hour-long Zoom session, and I noticed that the sound, even though I have a new laptop, it varied throughout the recording. And so when I tested with headphones, it seemed to work better. I hope it is. Um, but you want to make sure that everything is ready to go on your apps. And finally, there are a lot of great resources out there for you to practice. Here is something I found on LinkedIn: job interview cheat sheet. 6 questions that are great for you to practice, and you can use them in multiple ways. Okay, so that brings us to the end of the interview section. And I'm going to I'm going to ask that you write out responses to common interview questions and turn your accomplishment statements into interview examples. Again, using the STARS method, using cross-cultural competencies, using purpose-driven communication. And what I'm going to do, Heather, if you don't mind, I'm looking at the time.
Agreed.
I'll hop into the networking and job search sections real quickly, and then I can stay for questions as long as anyone would like after that, if that's acceptable.
Yep, that sounds great. We didn't have questions on this section anyway, so we'll let you go ahead and finish.
Perfect. Everyone's thinking alike. So, networking. I found that the concept of networking causes many people to cringe. I used to be that way until I became a coach and I started to think of networking as expanding community. So I ask that you don't cringe. Networking can be very helpful in the job search process, and it's the most common way to get a job. For instance, 70% of all jobs found through networking are found through networking, according to the US Bureau of Labor Statistics. And you can start in your established communities or expand your networks using informational interviews. And, when I gave my intro, I said all of those things I shared with you represented communities important to me. And I will tell you, every one of those I am using in my career transition right now. I'm reaching out to people in all of those different communities with informational interviews. And the purpose of the informational interview is to get information about future career paths and opportunities. Those interviews are not the time to ask for a job. And so you may think, why request an informational interview if not directly asking about a job opening? And that goes back to the statistic because 70% are found through people they know. And so, as you expand your informational interviewing, as you expand your networking, you will be known by more people and less and more likely to be thought of. So, this, I'm going to run through this quickly because it's pretty self-evident, but important to think about. When you want a informational interview, you will most likely send somebody an email. And even though this is a very common practice in the job search process, you're still asking somebody for their time. So you want to be courteous, you want to be efficient, and you want to be professional. Introduce yourself. This would be a great spot to use that career summary resume. Briefly explain why you want to talk to them. Ask for a phone conversation or virtual in-person coffee chat if you can. Maybe even offer them a cup of coffee. Thank them in advance. Let them know how grateful you are. Send an email reminder in advance, like the morning of, the evening before, just to make it as easy and convenient for them. Send them the link if it's virtual. Be early, not just on time, but be early. Have questions prepared. Let them know that you have thought about this in advance and you have specific things that you would like to know and take notes, not only because uh, people like to know what they're sharing with you is noteworthy, but also you may want those notes later. Ask for another person that you could have an informational interview with, a referral, and then follow up with a thank you note. Another thing that I hear quite often is, I'm not an extrovert. Networking, it's really not my thing. It won't work for me. And I would like to tell you that networking really is for everyone, especially now with our enhanced digital conferencing. You can find so many different ways to connect, even through LinkedIn messaging, that sort of thing. So, a few tips. Networking is a skill you can develop. It can be in person, virtual, LinkedIn. You start with people you know, your comfortable circle, and then you slowly expand out by asking for one more connection at a pace that is comfortable to you. And always know, keep in mind that people love sharing information. They love sharing their experience. And the more you do it, the more uh, the better you'll get. Practice does make perfect. A note about networking across cultures, much like writing your resume and interviewing across cultures, just keep in mind any cultural norms, nuances that uh, you want to be aware of so that you do not unintentionally offend somebody, such as communication styles, concept of hierarchy, formality versus informality, edits and protocol in that culture, dress for that occasion in that culture, and eye contact. So, quick tips. We're short on time. This is more a summary of what we have already talked about. Um, you will have access to that to read more at your leisure. And the homework for the networking section, I'd like to suggest that you make a list of your communities, very much like that intro. I covered 40 years in that intro, 35. Make a list of your communities. Develop a plan to expand your networks. And specifically, I will challenge you to conducting 3 informational interviews within the next month. So put that on your homework list. And we'll hold the questions. Final area I wanted to touch on today, and this is a real light touch, is online job search techniques. There is so much out there to make our career transition easier, more efficient. really the information is at our fingertips. And there are a lot of different things out there. For instance, job search engines. What is that? These are things like Indeed, Career Builder, LinkedIn, Glassdoor, Simply Hired. We have company websites, and those are, innumerable based on the company, but a great online resource. Also, social media, and I might caveat that to say professional social medias. So focused Facebook groups, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. We have also networking apps like LinkedIn, BumbleBiz. There are online freelancing platforms, freelancer.com, ZipRecruiter, and professional associations have an online presence. Um, this could be anything you might already belong to. For me, Rotary Club, also Women of Peace Corps Legacy, International Coach Federation. These are all professional associations that I lean to um, in my job search. Let's say, for instance, I understand there's a climate change focus to some of the presentations that you have. There is an RPCV group that actually I'm a part of, as a matter of fact, RPCVs for environmental action. That can be considered a professional association of sorts. I did a quick Google before this, and Climate Change Professional Association came up. Association of Climate Change Officers. So all of these online job search techniques can help us not only search out jobs, but also educate ourselves about um, what type of jobs a certain industry provides. And you might have noticed that on almost every one of these, LinkedIn came up. LinkedIn is probably, and you can ask other people, they might have a different opinion, but my opinion is probably the most powerful job search tool out there. For networking as well as advertising yourself or finding positions. And you can do a lot with the free version, but you can do even more with the premium. So if you haven't already established LinkedIn, you might want to look into it a little more. There are also a lot of great it can be a great networking platform as well as a job search tool. So with that, we have finished the last topic, and I would like to suggest to you that you review the list of career fair organizations for next week and start your research using some of those tools, perhaps that I mentioned before, um, or even informational interviewing, but start gearing up for the fair. And this is a summary of the homework. 14, unless you include the 3 informational interviews that I suggested that you do, then that makes 15 pieces of homework. You'll get a copy of the slides, so you can have that. And with that, I would like to ask Heather, do we have any questions?
Nope, we are all good.
All right then, which is good since I have run 9 minutes late, and I do apologize for that. I tried really hard to synthesize that 30 hours into 1 hour and 15 minutes, and it looks like I need to practice more. Um,
So I just want to jump here and say thank you, Kim, for a wonderful presentation. If you have any additional questions for Kim, please feel free to reach out to her through LinkedIn or the email found in the chat box. And a reminder to all RPCVs, PCVs, and staff, registration is still open for our in-person career fair taking place at Peace Corps headquarters in Washington, D.C. next Thursday, June 20th. And finally, we have 2 more workshops left to close out our career fair launch pad. Join us tomorrow for a resume writing workshop with FEMA, and this Thursday, June 13th, for a Rock Your Profile session with a senior LinkedIn representative to learn how to improve your profile and get noticed during your job search. The link to register for the events and the career fair can be found in the chat. And again, thank you all. Thank you, Kim, and have a great day.
Thank you, Kenya. Good luck, everyone.